Hello everybody, welcome to A British Audiophile. If you're new to this channel, my name is Taryn. I just want to talk about digital audio for a moment. It's been around for the best part of 40 years, and during that time they're products that I'd consider to be the benchmark in terms of performance. They set the standard in terms of sound quality within their given price category. And if I was reviewing such a product, I'd give it an outstanding. That's my top award, and that's what those awards are for. But every so often, there's a product that comes along that moves the needle significantly enough in terms of sound quality that I'd consider it no longer just to be a benchmark, but a landmark product within the digital landscape itself. The Chord Mojo, the original Chord Mojo, I'd consider to be such a product. Now, before I get accused of overstating things, let me just explain my reasons why. The Mojo had a blend of qualities that I'd never seen in a DAC below £1,000, let alone £400, which was its price at the time. It had a 3D immersive soundstage and a clarity whilst maintaining a fairly natural tonality that was unheard of around this price. Sure, there were DACs below £1,000 that had the clarity, perhaps even more clarity than the Mojo, but they simply didn't have a natural tonality. And there were DACs that had a natural tonality that simply didn't have the clarity. And I can't think of another DAC below £1,000 at the time when the Chord Mojo was released which had its sound staging ability. A lot of that is down to designer Rob Watt's coding ability, specifically the FPGA chip that finds itself at the heart of all Chord DACs. It's been developed over years, and it's trickled down technology that found its way into the Chord Mojo at a price point never seen before or since. But the digital landscape moves relatively quickly, and Chord is no longer the only game in town. It was only a matter of time before other manufacturers responded. The Denafrips Aries 2, due to being designed and built in China, has sonic attributes that could not have been contemplated in a sub £1,000 DAC 10 years ago. It's only natural that in time Chord would respond and update the Mojo, with the goal to improve sound quality and functionality. Yes, the Mojo 2 is still primarily designed for headphone use, but the additional functionality makes it more suitable for desktop use than ever before. That's going to be the focus of this review. The question is, have they pulled it off? The Chord Mojo 2 comes in the same sized anodized CNC milled aluminium case of the original Mojo, about the same size as a pack of cigarettes. Not that I'm advocating smoking. The Mojo 2 has more balls, going from 3 to 4 smaller polychromatic illuminated buttons to account for additional functionality such as crossfeed and DSP control. Pressing and holding the power button will cause the Mojo 2 to start up and run through its checks as indicated by it cycling through a range of colours. There are plus and minus buttons to alter the volume or make adjustment to the selected menu feature. That's why you now have the fourth button, which is for menu access. Crossfeed is for headphone listening when you want to take some of the right channel information and feed it into the left and vice versa in an attempt to get the soundstage beyond the space of your two ears to try to emulate a speaker listening experience. Press the menu button once and it lights up blue to illustrate that crossfeed has been selected. There are 4 settings. Red is minimum, green is moderate, blue is maximum, and unlit means crossfeed is off. Double press the menu button and you're into the first of 4 DSP equalization controls. Red is for lower bass. Yellow is a shelf acting below 125 Hz. Green is for a lower treble shelf operating above 3000 Hz. Blue is for upper treble adjustment. Each equalization mode can be adjusted in 1 dB steps to an increment or reduction of a maximum plus or minus 9 decibels. Used individually or in combination, you're able to make significant alterations to the frequency response to synergize with partnering equipment, compensate for poor recording quality, or just to suit your taste. Press the menu button 6 times until it displays magenta, and then simultaneously press the volume up and volume down buttons to activate lockdown mode. It disables the controls if you're using the Mojo 2 on the go. repeat the process to obtain access again. Pressing the plus and minus buttons together will mute the device, and either press them again or press the menu button to exit mute. If you get yourself in a muddle, you can restore factory settings by pressing plus and minus simultaneously when in DSP or crossfeed mode. It will set the DSP to flat and switch crossfeed off. With this degree of complexity, I can't help but think that a simple LCD screen would have been preferable to committing these controls to memory. However, I'm sure they become familiar with frequent use. The Mojo 2 has an optical Toslink input, a USB-B to connect to a 5-volt charger, a USB-B input. The USB-C input is new, and a 3.5mm coaxial connection. Optical and coaxial are limited by their bandwidth to a maximum of 192 kHz, 24-bit resolution. However, this DAC will play PCM up to 768 kHz through its USB connection, as well as play DSD. It was a requirement of the design brief that the two USB-B connections remain unchanged, so that the Mojo 2 remains compatible with Chord's Poly Streamer. The two 3.5mm headphone output jacks are also unchanged, and it should be able to drive all but the most difficult headphones with a 600 milliwatt output into 30 ohms, dropping to 90 milliwatts into 300 ohms. That isn't the focus of this review. For hi-fi use, you'll either need an RCA to 3.5mm cable, or my preferred option, an adapter like the Audio Quest, which allows me to use my Chord signature cables. Let's scratch a little bit below the surface of the design of the Chord Mojo 2, and a good place to start is with the FPGA chip itself. One of the benefits of using an FPGA chip like we find in the Chord Mojo 2 over a standard chip from, say, AKM or ESS is the additional processing power. It's around 500 times more powerful. A lot of that additional processing power is given over to the WTA filter, the Watts Time Align filter. It's an interpolation filter, and its job is to fill in the gaps between one digital sample and the next. It does that by running an algorithm a number of times. The more times it can run that algorithm, the more accurate it can be, and that's what defines the number of taps, the number of times it runs that algorithm. The tap count has increased on the Chord Mojo 2 from the Chord Mojo 1, from 38,912 taps to 40,960, but that's incremental. The main advancement in the implementation of the FPGA is something else. Power limitations in the design of the Chord Mojo meant that its FPGA could only run at a third of its capacity. In the Mojo 2, it runs at 98% of its capacity. In order to do that, Rob Watts saved 300 milliwatts from the analog output section of the DAC and gave 250 milliwatts of that to the FPGA. The rest was there to improve battery life, which has gone up by 9%. Another significant change in circuit design is that there's no longer a coupling capacitor between one stage and the next. It's now directly coupled. Removing the coupling capacitor should improve transparency, but then Rob Watts was left with a problem. It was the coupling capacitor that gave the original Mojo its warmth in the first place, and he felt that that was important to retain somehow, because Chord Mojo is likely to be used with a lot of inexpensive headphones, and a lot of those can be quite bright sounding. So that's why he looked into offering equalization through DSP. The problem with DSP is that it's no longer lossless. You no longer have a bit perfect rendition of the original data, and it can degrade sound quality, mainly due to phase inaccuracies. And what that basically means is that small signals and large signals, as well as low frequencies and high frequencies, don't pass through it at the same rate, causing timing inaccuracies. Rob Watts feels that he's got round this somehow due to refinement in the implementation of the WTA filter and noise shaping, but the proof is always in the pudding. The final thing that I want to talk about in this section is a new feature called Intelligent Desktop Mode. It has two aspects. The first is battery regulation, which means you can leave a charger connected at all times without fear of cooking the battery. That's really useful if you're using it for headphone and desktop use. A big improvement over the Mojo 1. The second is auto switching between the inputs, which means that you can leave all 4 inputs connected at all time, and if it detects a signal, it should switch automatically. It will prioritize USB over coax and coax over optical. I have to say that I struggle with the auto switching feature. Whenever I put my USB streaming device into standby, it wouldn't automatically detect the signal coming through the optical connection. For whatever reason, perhaps the intelligent desktop mode needs to be submitted for an IQ test. I think there would have been a simple solution to this. The power button could easily have been programmed to double up for input selection, and that would have got around the issue altogether. There's quite a bit that I had to cover in this video, so I'm going to keep this section as succinct as I possibly can. Besides, I always find it a little bit tiresome when people drone on endlessly about sound quality. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be that complicated. There's three main areas of performance that can be broken down into subsections. They are clarity, tonality, scale and dynamics. Before someone says, well, that's actually four, I'm classifying scale and dynamics as one. God, I sound like a grumpy old man. I've got to stop filming these videos when I'm hungry. The Mojo 2 ticks the box firmly in all three categories, and the only DAC that I could think was the same below 500 quid was the original Mojo. However, the version 2 offers greater performance pretty much across the board. It's a cleaner sounding DAC. The bass has better definition. It's still on the full side rather than the taut side of what I'd consider perfectly neutral. And it's a similar story in the mid-range. It's more open. The leading edges of notes are more cleanly defined. It's easier to track individual instruments, and the overall soundstage is a little bit wider. I'm sure a lot of this is down to the improved transient response that I was talking about earlier. The highs are also a little bit more open with a bit more airiness on top. Overall, it gives the Mojo 2 a more neutral tonal balance, even though it still sits slightly on the warm side of neutral. This is the sonic signature that I wish that the original Mojo had right from the beginning. I know that Rob Watts deliberately made it sound a little bit warm at the bottom and rolled off on top due to concerns with partnering equipment, in particular inexpensive headphones. I don't think he envisaged that it'd be used in more expensive systems, whether it's more expensive headphones or desktop systems at the time, and I felt that that sonic signature always sold the Mojo short. Well, I've got nothing to complain about now. Now, I should say at this point that all my comments relate to listening to the Mojo 2 with the DSP set flat. Of course, you can change the sonic signature to some extent by playing with the DSP, and the DSP works fine. I didn't find any drop in fidelity when I made fine adjustments, but I would exercise a word of caution here. I think it's only appropriate for making fine adjustments to your system or recording. I certainly wouldn't be using plus or minus 6 or 9 dB swings. It isn't a full parametric EQ, and if you're having to do that, you've got some fundamental imbalance in your system, and this is going to be a band-aid. It's not really going to fix that problem. I also compared the Mojo 2 to one of SML's top tier of DACs, the VMV D1 SE, that retails for around £750 and has a measured performance that's state-of-the-art. I really like that DAC. It has excellent clarity. It's cleaner sounding than the Mojo 2. You hear a little bit more of what's on the recording. It also has surprisingly natural tonality for an ESS based DAC, but it has limited soundstage width and very little soundstage depth compared to the Mojo 2 at least, which is much wider and much deeper and gives you a more immersive sound field experience. Also, the Mojo 2 is a richer, more full-bodied sounding DAC, so it's a question of whether you're prepared to trade a little bit of clarity for those characteristics. I know that I would be. I know it's a bit silly, but it's here, so I may as well compare the Mojo 2 to the Denafrips Pontus 2, which is around 4 times its price. I'm not going to say too much here. It's not a fair comparison. I'm only providing this as a way of context. Let's face it, this is going to be a fairly positive review. And I'm not one for hyping things up. The Denafrips Pontus 2 outperformed the Chord Mojo 2 in all areas, as you'd expect. What would have been a more fair comparison is something like the Denafrips Aries 2, which sells for less than £1,000, but I don't have that here at this time. My impression though, having lived with that DAC for some time, is that the Mojo 2 would give the Aries 2 a little bit of a run for its money. The Chord Mojo 2 is pretty much plug and play. From a usability perspective, I don't have a huge issue that there isn't a small LCD to display functions, even though it would have been nice. I think if you're using this DAC regularly, you'll get used to the colored buttons pretty quickly. What I have a slight gripe about is the auto switching of inputs, which I did find to be a little bit temperamental. As I mentioned earlier in this video, a simple solution to this would have been to be able to manually select inputs with a press of a button. And I would ask Chord to look at this in a future revision. What I really want to talk about is the kind of systems that this DAC would work in. Most of my primary listening was done using my Exposure 21 preamp and 18 super mono blocks. They were connected to my Proact Response 1SC speakers, so I wanted to see how this DAC performed with the best system I had to hand. It did really well, considering how revealing that system is, especially in the mid-range, much better than it had any right to. Don't get me wrong, it is the component that I'd upgrade first, but we're talking about a £450 DAC connected to a pair of speakers and an amplifier. If they were being built today, would cost you the best part of £8,000. There was some more price appropriate components I tried as well. The Buchart S400 Mark IIs that I've only just finished reviewing, yours sold direct from Buchart for €2,000. The petite but excellent Dali Minuet SEs that retail here in the UK for around £1,300. Amplification was provided by the superb Wilsington R8 with upgraded PS Vane tubes, yours for around £1,500 by the time you get it delivered here in the UK. Or the equally capable Exposure 2510. If you don't fancy messing around with tubes, it will cost you a similar amount of money. It's exactly with amplifiers and speakers around that price range, £1,000 to £2,000, where I think you're getting the best value for money from this DAC. But I did try one other amplifier as well. The Hagel H190 retails for £3,300 in the UK and comes with its own very good built-in DAC. This is an example of where I wouldn't upgrade. Now don't be mistaken, the Mojo 2 is a better sounding DAC than the one that's inside the Hagel. In fact, the internal DAC sounds similar to the SMSL VMV D1 SE. You could practically cut and paste my comments here. I just don't think it's worth spending £450 for the improvement that you get. I'd much rather buy a more expensive DAC, even if it meant saving up, something like the Denafrips Pontis 2 or a more expensive Chord DAC for that matter, or put that additional money into upgrading speakers and amplification. Chord have done a fabulous job with the Mojo 2, updating a DAC whose legacy is assured. An FPGA DAC in the hands of a digital wizard, offering a level of performance never seen before at this price. If you're prepared to put up with some limitations in terms of functionality and connectivity, my word does this offer some sonic performance for the price. I'll be flabbergasted if you could find something better. I'm sure you know where this is heading. The Chord Mojo 2 gets an outstanding from this channel. My question for today is, what have been the landmark digital products through your hi-fi journey, or just in general, the products that you have heard or read about and thought, wow, they'd be amazing to own? I'd love to hear about them in the comment section below. All that remains for me to say is, if you like this video, you like what I'm doing with this channel, and you want to see it grow, please do all that social media stuff. And check me out on Patreon for bonus content and consultancy services. But for today, for now, the British Audiophile, signing off.